This is an overview of the final exam study guide. There are 4 questions, one from each chapter that you studied in the final couple weeks of the course. Question 1 is from chapter 12. Discuss the 3 perspectives of gender as discussed in the text. So remember, you're not just giving a one-sentence discussion of each of the 3 perspectives. You will tell me what the functionalist perspective says about gender and give me some details and some examples. Details and examples are crucial if you want to get the maximum points on this and any question. Define gender socialization and explain how family, schools, media, and peer interactions influence gender socialization. Right? So again, once you define gender socialization, you must talk about each of these 4 agents of socialization. You must talk about family and how it influences gender socialization and give some details and examples. You must talk about schools and media and peer interactions, each one of them separately. And as you are discussing them, you're giving examples and details to support the statements that you make. Should transgender athletes be allowed to compete in sports that align with their gender identity, or should they be made to compete based on their biological identity? You probably realize that there is a controversy over this, not just in the Olympics and other sports that like track and field sports, etc., swimming, you name it. And of course, also at the high school level. And so because of the increasingly negative laws that are being passed about the rights of transgender students, transgender individuals, I'm asking you here, what do you think? And of course, you're welcome to look more into this. You can look at some various stories on the website to find out more information about this if you're not very familiar with it. And if you're not very familiar, you really need to do that, because just saying, well, I don't really know about this issue, so I can't really say, that doesn't cut it. Or just saying, well, yeah, I think they should be allowed to compete with the team that aligns with their gender. Okay, but why? And I specifically tell you here, provide 2 examples or reasons for your opinion. Question number 14, question number 2 from chapter 14. Describe the 7 stages of families. And again, be sure to use details and examples, right? Don't just list the stages. You've got to explain what happens in each stage. How have TV shows changed the portrayal of families since the 1960s? All right, so there's information in the textbook. You can, again, also do a little bit of research into this. And by research, I'm not talking about hardcore research. I'm just talking about looking at TV shows that were popular in the 60s and the 70s versus TV shows that were popular in the 80s and 90s, and maybe what was popular when you were young, which I'm guessing is for most of you in the early 2000s, and then what's popular now. How have we seen the way that families are portrayed since the 1960s? How has that changed? Provide 2 examples to support your view. Discuss at least 2 types of child abuse and their effects on children. Okay, so remember, 2 types and their effects. Okay, what happens when children experience these things? Finally, in your opinion, should spanking be used sometimes or never? Give 2 reasons to support your view. Again, this is something that people disagree about, whether children should never be spanked or whether sometimes it's necessary. And what is your opinion and why? What are 2 reasons for why you think it should sometimes be used, or maybe you think it should never be used? Question 3 is from chapter 16. Explain the functionalist conflict, and symbolic interactionist perspectives regarding education. Okay, once again, you're giving details and examples about each perspective, and you're not just lumping them into one statement, you're explaining each one individually. In your opinion, which perspective best describes what is happening in schools today? Now, obviously, you're no longer still in the K-12 educational system, but some of you may have children or nieces or nephews or brothers and sisters that are still in the system. And you can also base this on your own experience in K-12, during your K-12 school years. Support your view with 2 examples. Explain the history of the education of children with learning differences and disabilities. Now, of course, there are learning differences, things such as dyslexia or ADHD, ADD, etc. There are a number of learning differences. And we call them differences because it's just a different way that people learn things. It's not good or bad, right or wrong, it's just different. We no longer call them learning disabilities, they're learning differences. But there are also physical disabilities. So that's what I'm talking about with disabilities, the physical disabilities. So children perhaps who use some sort of device to get around, or perhaps they are blind, etc. Okay. Explain the history of education of those children. Explain at least 2 issues that need improvement for these children's education. And there's a great deal of information in the textbook about the history of educating children with learning differences and disabilities, but also information about some of the changes that have been made in the last 30 or 40 years and the last 10 or 12, but also what we still need to do to improve the opportunities for children who fall into this category. Question 4 is from chapter 17. Describe the difference between power and authority and provide an example of each. All right, so power and authority are related, but they are different. So make sure that you explain the difference and give an example of each one. Explain the 3 types of authority and give an example of each. Okay, so those are charismatic and traditional authority and rational legal authority. And so I now ask you, and so of course you can give an example of each. If you could have one of these types of authority, which would you choose? Okay, so of those 3 types, which one would you choose? Tell me which one you would choose and provide 2 reasons for your choice. You know, why would you want charismatic authority, or why would you want legal rational authority? It doesn't matter which one you want, just tell me why. What would be your reasons for choosing that one? Discuss 3 findings regarding how race, ethnicity, and social class have influenced voting practices. Okay, so in the text there's information about what research has found about how those 3 characteristics influence voting practices. So discuss them. Tell me, what are 3 of those findings? Finally, in your opinion, which of the 3 perspectives best explains government and politics in the U.S. today? Provide 2 reasons for your conclusion. Of course, talking here about the 3 perspectives, the functionalist, the conflict, and the symbolic interactionist perspective. So of those 3, which one do you think best explains government and politics in the U.S. today? Which analysis do you think is the better one? If you think it's one, great. If you think it's the functionalist perspective, provide 2 reasons for why you've made that conclusion. If you think it's both, 2, great. Tell me why you think these 2 explain it. If you think it's all 3, tell me why you think all 3. You don't have to only choose one. But you do need to tell me 2 reasons for why you choose a particular perspective. That is it As always, I know that if you study and you prepare, you will do fine, perhaps even well on the exam.